and welcome to The Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, we're talking about military personnel and veterans and the lifestyle. This is something for me that is a little bit personal, and there was somebody that reached out a while ago that did actually ask me about this subject. I'm kind of expanding on what the question was, but because being a veteran myself, being a part of the lifestyle for as long as I have been, prior to my service and after my service, this show today is really going to kind of sit at home with me. And there is a lot of you out there that I've spoken to, some that I'm friends with that are vets too, that are in countries all over the world. So hopefully today's show is going to kind of speak to you. What I'm talking about today is going to be more about how these experiences shape the way military people, veterans or active duty, engage with power exchange. The structure, the discipline, the leadership, all ingrained in military service don't just disappear when someone steps into BDSM. For some, those qualities make them natural dominance, while for others, they find truth in themselves in the submissive part of the lifestyle. This is, viewed more as a way to release that control in a healthy, structured environment. Strength and surrender aren't opposites here, and today we're going to break down how that plays out in DS dynamics. Now, before I dive in, I want to take a moment, like I always do. I want to thank all of my listeners, both those of you who have been with me from the beginning, that keep listening week in, week out, that are sending me more and more commentary, that are speaking about the show, that are posting external links on the show, or those who are just starting to tune in. All of your support. And I mean every comment, message, discussion that comes from this show, it means a lot to me. And if you are enjoying my show, make sure you follow me along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you do get your, podcasts from. That way you're never going to miss an episode. And I do kindly ask you, please rate my show at least 5 stars. This allows other people to find my show, connect with the show, and maybe hear something that they need to hear. And if you'd like to support the work that I do, you can find a donation link in the show notes. Every contribution helps me keep these conversations going, bring more content to the community and to the world, our global community around the world. And whether you're here for education, perspective, or just curiosity, I appreciate you being part of the discussion. All right, so let's get into today's topic. First, the whole military mindset and its influence on power exchange. Now, when people think of the military, they think of structure. Discipline, authority, orders are given to us, they're followed and executed with precision. There's no room for hesitation, uncertainty, or questioning high-pressure environments. That kind of conditioning stays with people long after they leave their service. It shapes how we interact with the world, our relationships, and when they step into BDSM, and the way that they engage inside of the power exchange dynamic. For some, this makes them natural dominance. The ability to lead with confidence, to command a room, to strategize effectively, all are skills that are transferable seamlessly into our dynamics. Others, however, may find peace in submission, in giving up that control, in a way that feels safe and intentional to them as a temporary reprieve from the stress of all of that authoritarian command that they carry. Now, regardless of the role that they take on, military personnel bring up a unique mindset to BDSM. One that can be both an advantage and sometimes a challenge, right? A lot of this here centers around our command presence and our authority. And then when we look at the military, leadership isn't just a skill, it's a necessity for us. Service members are trained to take charge, make decisions under pressure, and lead others through difficult situations. That kind of presence, often called a command presence, is one of the defining traits as a strong dominant. Military-trained dominants tend to be decisive, structured, deeply aware of responsibility, all of which can make for incredibly solid and dependable power exchange dynamics. But there is a challenge too. The military operates on a rigid hierarchy and absolute obedience. Orders are given, they're followed. There's not a negotiation here, there isn't a compromise. Now, that mindset can sometimes carry over into DS in ways that don't always work. In the lifestyle, power exchange is definitely built on our communication, mutual agreement, adaptability, consent. A dominant who expects blind obedience without considering their submissive's needs isn't leading, they're dictating. Now, this can be especially challenging for those transitioning from active duty into civilian life where authority isn't absolute. And this can even be more difficult or more challenging, if you will, for those that are active members still currently in the military. In the lifestyle, dominants have to balance structure with flexibility. They need to be able to lead, yes, absolutely, but they have to listen. That's a shift for some military DOMs who are used to having their word be the final say. Now, we know power exchange isn't about issuing commands. It literally is about building something together. Now, at the same time, this ability to step into a leadership with confidence can be incredibly attractive to submissives who thrive on structure and reliability. A military Dom isn't often someone who doesn't second guess themselves, but who knows how to take control in a way that feels safe and reassuring. Now, that sense of protection and authority can definitely be intoxicating in the right hands. But like any dominant, it really is the key. There is a key here knowing when to lead and when to listen. Now, there is another side to this coin. Many military personnel, especially those in positions of high authority, might find themselves drawn to submission, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think actually it surprises a lot of people. There's this misconception that submission is weak, that it's about giving up your power in a way that makes someone lesser, but the truth is submission is an active choice. And I think we really need to remember that. We're actively deciding to hand over the reins of control to somebody else. And it takes an incredible amount of trust and strength to hand over control, especially for someone who's used to always being in charge. Now, for those who haven't spent years making life and death decisions, carrying the weight of leadership, and being responsible for others, submission can be a form of release here. It's one of the only spaces where they don't have to be in control, where they can stop making the decisions and just be. That's not weakness. That's trust. And for a lot of high responsibility people, it's one of the only ways they truly get to let go. This is why you'll often find military officers, CEOs, first responders, and politicians potentially, and other high pressure professionals deeply involved in submission. They spend their entire lives leading. They make difficult and hard choices, and being the one that people look to for guidance, that does take a toll. It creates that immense amount of scrutiny and intention and pressure on somebody. The appeal of stepping into a dynamic where they no longer have to carry that weight can truly be profound to someone. Now, the key difference between military life and submission is that in the military, surrender isn't a choice for us, it's forced. But in the lifestyle, submission is freely given. And that's really an important distinction. When a military-trained individual enters a DS relationship, maybe as a submissive, it's because they want to be in that position. It's because they find peace, structure, or even fulfillment in letting someone else take the reins for a while so they don't have to make any tough choices. Now, of course, there's challenges here as well. Someone who's used to leading may struggle to let go, or maybe even wanting to. Trusting another person to take control, especially in something deeply personal like DS, and extremely vulnerable way for a lot of us, can feel like an uphill battle. It requires a shift in thinking from seeing submission as something that's done to them or to something, that they're actively choosing to engage in. But we do have the power of choice, and that's where the real power of submission lies, in that choice. Now, like I said before, in the military, we got to follow orders, and that's not negotiable. There's no room for questioning or backing out of a situation, but in the lifestyle here, everything is based on consent and agreement. A submissive chooses to submit, to follow, to surrender that control about themselves, and live within the structure of their relationship. And that's a radical shift in mindset for someone who's coming from a world where obedience was expected and not offered freely. Understanding that distinction is crucial for a lot of military personnel and veterans who step into submission. It's not about being ordered around. It's about trusting someone enough to let them lead. And that's a huge psychological shift, but one that can be incredibly fulfilling when embraced fully. I do have some little bit of thoughts on this segment here. whether someone really is stepping in as a dom or a sub that's in the military or coming out of the military, they're a veteran, that military mindset really does play a huge role in shaping who they are and their approach. The structure, the leadership, the discipline that define us as military service members, whether active or now veterans, can make us for a strong, capable, dominant, and someone who's deeply committed, right? Or it can make for a really thoughtful, submissive that's just ready to trust and let go. But it does present its challenges. Learning to adapt, to communicate, to embrace that vulnerability in the ways that the military life doesn't allow us to do. And for those in a lifestyle who come from a service background, the journey is about finding that balance between the two, knowing when to lead, when to follow, and most importantly, when to trust. So how do we balance all of this strength and vulnerability inside of DS? Well, if we're going to step into the lifestyle from a military background, whether we're active duty or we're a veteran, it's not just about power. It's about learning to navigate the balance between strength and that vulnerability. And that's where things get complicated. Because when we're in the military, even when we come out, everything we do, for the most part, is about control. Strength is not negotiable. Showing weakness, hesitation, doubt, fear, that's discouraged. Sometimes even punished. And whether someone has served for a few years or made a career out of it, that conditioning runs deep. And in power exchange, where trust and vulnerability are essential, that mindset can create some real challenges for us. For military personnel who become dominants, there can be an overwhelming pressure to always be in control, to never let their guard down, to never show uncertainty, never falter. But let me tell you, when we make a mistake, we've got to make that mistake and we have to learn from it. We have to be ready to allow ourselves to fail, because that's when we learn to succeed. And for those of you who lean towards submission, the struggle is just as intense. Trusting someone else to take control after so many years of being responsible or in charge for everyone else's safety and well-being, that's not a small thing. It requires an entirely different kind of strength, a different type of mental fortitude, one that the military folks aren't typically used to accessing. And there is a struggle to let go, because for anybody stepping into that part, the hardest part isn't just a physical aspect, it's that entire mental shift. We are trained to be self-reliant, hyper-aware, and in control. That kind of vigilance for us doesn't just turn off because someone else steps into a DS relationship. And even if they want to let go, there's often a deeply ingrained resistance to doing so. That's why so many military submissives struggle trusting their dominance completely. It's not about doubting their partner's ability. It's about a lifetime of conditioning that says, if I'm not the one in control, bad things happen. And that's a hard belief to unlearn. Now, for some, submission only works if their dominant proves their competence beyond a doubt. That not just a leader in that relationship, but someone who understands the background and the unique challenges that they face. And while some military submissives can physically submit with no issue, the emotional side of things is often much harder. Pain, restriction, even the strict discipline, that's not a problem. But allowing someone to see how emotionally vulnerable you are, that's going to feel like it's impossible. But it is achievable. Now, for those who've spent your careers compartmentalizing your emotions and your intimacy, your trust, even your openness, it can be intimidating that any scene or protocol where you have to start expressing those things is difficult, but you can do it. And this is why a structured and well-negotiated dynamic can be incredibly beneficial, because then we have clear expectations, we have detailed protocols, we have a strong foundation of trust that allows, if you are on that side, on the submissive side, to gradually test their ability to let go in a way that feels safe. Because it's not about immediately diving in and being vulnerable and just opening up. It's about knowing that there's a framework in place that supports you, and that allows you to how you're going to navigate it. And when we look again on the other side, we come back to the dominant side. There are challenges for military dominance. There's a lot of expectation. I know long ago, I was in the lifestyle long before I joined the military, right? And I learned to start letting go of expectations. That changed when I entered the military, because then I had expectations, right? But when we have these expectations, I have it not only for myself, but we had it for others. And people had it of me. We had to be strong and commanding and unwavering. And people who take this role on, who become dominants in the lifestyle, so for some of us, it's natural. But some people do struggle with the unspoken pressure that's, you always have to be in control, to never show that weakness, to never question yourself. And let me tell you, that can be a difficult thing to do. Because the issue here is that a rigid, unyielding dominant isn't always a good one. Leadership in the military is often very different from leadership in the lifestyle. Service orders are followed because we have to do those things. But because if we, once we realize and we can, understand that that submission is given to us by choice freely, that means we are in a position that's more than just authoritative. We have to be emotionally intelligent. We have to be adaptable, and we have to be responsive. And that's going to be a tough adjustment for some people. Because, if you're a Dom that's in the military who's used to just, giving commands that are followed without question, we need to adapt to somebody's feelings. Because if we don't develop the ability to listen, to adjust, and to recognize when our partner needs something different, that style of leadership can become too rigid, too impersonal, and ultimately unhealthy. And there are some that I've talked to that they have a huge fear of failure. They carry a deep sense of responsibility, feeling if they aren't perfect in their role, that they've somehow failed. And this can make it difficult for them to communicate their own needs, their struggles, their moments of doubt. The idea of saying, I need to step back, or, I don't have all the answers right now, can feel completely foreign. Because even the strongest leaders know that acknowledging limits is just as important as enforcing them. And for a healthy dynamic in the lifestyle, as Doms, we have to learn that control isn't about just being untouchable. It's about being trusted. A Dom who can admit when they need to adjust, who can show emotional intelligence alongside of strength, will always be someone who is, if that's you and you can do those things, you will be more effective than someone who relies solely on the authoritative and disciplinarian side. Now, look, there are Doms that are completely authoritative, that are completely about discipline, but that works for them. But there is a softness inside of that rigidity, and we have to learn that, right? Because the lifestyle isn't the military, and we need to understand these things. Now, one of the more common things you'll hear maybe inside of the lifestyle is that high-ranking members of the military are often privately submissive. I think the same goes for other leaderships, heavy professions, lawyers and doctors, politicians. But, for a lot of military personnel in particular, the need for that privacy around whatever they do is often really heightened, right? Because no matter what the stigma is, let me tell you, the military doesn't look kindly on the lifestyle. It's not something that is favorable, right? Because we always have to be willing and ready and able to perform our duties, and bruising isn't always something that's quite acceptable, unfortunately. They won't think that we are completely combat effective or completely 100% effective, and that anything that can disrupt that is problematic, right? So what do we, when we really start putting this all together here and we look at this whole military approach to structure and discipline, what does that ultimately mean as we start putting all of these pieces of this puzzle together? Well, we do know one thing. This becomes one of the more defining aspects of military life is structure, right? If I think of nothing else, it's how it's formed and how it's done. Everything is a routine. Up at 5, get yourself shaved, get in line, get ready for chow, 5:30, right? 30 minutes sounds like a lot of time, but when you're mustering 60, 70, 80 people, it's not a lot, right? Bathroom space is limited, let me tell you. But it's not just routine, it's the discipline, and it's the total adherence to a clear hierarchy. That kind of training doesn't just disappear when someone steps into the civilian world. It's how we think now. It becomes how we operate. Now, there are plenty of people who maybe didn't like their experience and let that part go, but there's a lot of us who appreciate it and still follow it, right? And when we look at the lifestyle, especially when we get into high protocol dynamics, that's a world I like to inhabit. The same sense of order and precision can feel not just familiar, but really satisfying. And that's why I'm a part of it. It also helps that I have a law enforcement background. That further helps it. Now, for many military personnel that, are in the lifestyle, it's not just the power exchange that brings us there. It's about that framework that makes sense to us. Now, whether we take one role of this, the slash or the other, all of this structure provides purpose, stability, and even freedom for ourselves. Because it's not about blindly following orders or enforcing authority just for the sake of it. It's about knowing where you stand, what's expected, and being able to fully engage in some sort of dynamic with somebody with clarity and confidence. Now, all of our training in the military is relentless and constant, right? Drills and tests and understanding military code and all of these things, right? Every movement, every action, every response, it's drilled into us and it becomes second nature, like breathing. That kind of repetition creates efficiency, reliability, and a deep sense of self-discipline. For the most part, I had some dirtbags inside of my division that wouldn't make their bed or do other things just for the sake of punishment. You'd think the guy was a maso, but then when we all started getting punished, that didn't really last very long. No, there was no code reds. This is not the Tom Cruise movie, right? But for those people who transition to the lifestyle, especially into the high protocol areas, that structure for us, it feels like home. And high protocol DS dynamics, where every action is intentional and rituals are emphasized, it mirrors a lot of the aspects of military life. There's an expectation of precision and respect and obedience for us. But unlike the military, submission and BDSM, again, is given by choice. And that control, once we achieve it or we take ownership of that control, we also have to lead by example, and we learn to adapt. We grow, and we show a side of ourselves that's rescinded inside of the military, and that's our emotional side, right? All the comfort and the rules and expectations change because we have to bring in a new side of ourselves into the lifestyle that we've kind of suppressed for a long period of time. Now, I'm going to speculate a little bit here because I've only talked to a few. So I can't say there was enough people that I've spoken to that I can apply this broadly, but I do want to talk about a little bit about pain tolerance and masochism here, right? Now, there is a lot of overlap between military experience and pain tolerance, right? Military training, it pushes us to our physical and mental limits quite often. Now, whether that's enduring a really torturous workout, running on a little bit of sleep, or being conditioned to ignore discomfort, a lot of service members develop a high threshold for pain. That can translate, not necessarily, right? Because physical pain is different than mental pain, but that can translate into the lifestyle where a lot of people find themselves drawn to either maybe doling out that pain, right? Sadists, shout out to all my sadists, favorite sadists out there, or the masochists, right? One doesn't work without the other. Now, for some of us, it's about stress relief, because pain provides a clear and physical sensation that's, quiets the mind and brings a lot of focus. Especially when you've had years of being on high alert and you're constantly assessing threats and managing responsibilities. A heavy impact scene can be an escape, a way to feel completely present in the moment. Now, for some, they could be drawn to the endurance aspect of, masochism. That whole military training that's built on pushing us past our limits, proving our resilience and enduring discomfort as a weird badge of strength, that same mindset can make pain play feel rewarding. Sometimes like a test of will, right? But there's also a risk here. Not all engagement with pain is healthy. Some service members struggle with using pain as self-punishment rather than as a consensual, controlled experience. If pain becomes a way to cope with guilt or frustration or something may be unresolved here, rather than a positive outlet, it can lead to a destructive behavior rather than a healing process. And this is why intentionality matters. Understanding why pain is appealing and making sure that it's used in a way that enhances rather than harms. We need to understand that difference, right? For those dominants out there, right, for the people that are on my side, pain does play a role for us, right? For some of us who engage in sadism, we do so with precision and control. We treat impact play almost like a carefully calculated exercise. The challenge here is learning to engage beyond the mechanics to understand the emotional and psychological side of pain play rather than just a physical sensation. Now, sometimes we get a little bit frisky and we throw the rules books out the window. We negotiate a really heavy scene like strapping someone down to a table with chains and, vicing their head so they can't move, and then beating them with a leather belt. All consensually, of course, right? That is a hypothetical. I'm not saying that's ever happened. I'm just giving you a hypothetical, right? These things do happen. There can be cathartic releases, not just for the not just for the masochist, but it could be a cathartic release for the sadist as well, right? All of these things, all of this, our intentionality, it all speaks to us, but it matters, right? Because here at the core, BDSM, this whole lifestyle that we're involved in and we're encompassed by, that we're wrapped in by like a warm blanket, provides something that a lot of military personnel crave. That structure, the clarity, purpose. Now, whether they step into a role of a dominant or submissive, maybe even a switch because you're greedy, right? Or a service-oriented partner or top, right? The discipline and the training from our military background can naturally influence how we engage inside of that power dynamic. And for a lot of us that are drawn to high protocol, the familiarity of the rules and the rituals and the structure can provide a lot of stability and security. And for those who explore pain play, for example, it's an outlet for stress potentially, or a test of your endurance, or a deeply grounding experience. There's a lot of different things we can find. And for those of us who take things to the next level, whether you go into submission or you find your strength and calling inside of dominance, no matter what you do, you learn to make sure, no matter what you're doing here, is you got to differentiate between your obedience and your engagement, between your endurance and your self-care, between duty and devotion. Because if you do that with purpose, these elements create something deeply rewarding for all of us, especially our partners and ourselves. It gives us another level. It doesn't take away from your experience. I promise you. It'll build on what you learned, that structure inside of the military. It has for me. Maybe it won't for you, but if you at least give it a shot, if you try to be open to it, it'll build to it. It'll make it better. And at the very least, it's going to make your dynamics feel both more familiar and then sometimes more transformative. Now look, I know I've kind of covered a lot here today, but the key takeaway is that the military service we decided to be a part of, it shapes how we approach power exchange. And it really can do so in deep and meaningful and lasting ways. That discipline, that structure, all of those leadership skills that we developed in the military or are still developing, they can naturally influence no matter what role we go into inside of the lifestyle. If you are active duty, please be careful. And I want to say this, don't be posting your pictures of yourself in your uniforms and you're like, yeah, I'm off to Guam, or, hey, I'm going to Ramstein, let's get to a spanking. But don't do that, because if the military finds out, right, there's something else you can deal with. So that's just more advice for you than anything else, right? Just keep these things in mind. But I think, speaking on a personal note here, I think the biggest misconception I hear is that, on the submissive side, that strength and submission are total opposites, but they aren't. They're some of the strongest, most capable people I've met, leaders, a couple of high-ranking people that I know. I'm not going to go into any details about rank. Some people with decades of service, they find some very deep and emotional connection and fulfillment inside of submission. Not because they're weak, These people are not weak, but because that submission gives them something that they don't get anywhere else on this planet, the ability to release that control in a way that feels intentional and meaningful and powerful to them. And when I look at some of the dominance that I know, I see all of that power that they're adapting to and influence, but they're learning to grow within the emotional intelligence side of themselves. They're learning to listen and hear and respond in a more meaningful and caring way. And I've seen that make their military careers a lot better. They may not necessarily show that side, but it's a trait that they've learned and that they can use and adapt inside of their military career. Now, no matter where you are inside of all of this, no matter what you do, I want you to understand that power exchange is all about one thing. It's about choice. And that's the most important part we need to understand. And I think a lot of us forget that, whether you're military or not. When we talk about TPE, when we talk about the lifestyle, we talk about BDSM, DS is built on power exchange, because that's the whole point of it. You can argue with me something different, that's fine. I'm old school, and you're never going to change my mind, because whatever new age stuff and you want to do, that's fine if it works for you, but I'm not reshaping things because you don't like the structure. My structure, the structure that's come before me, that's going to live long past me, is not going to change because a couple of people want it to change to fit what they want it to be. Then figure out what you want, but don't change the rest of us, right? We like that choice. Now, if you are in the military or you're a veteran, if you've got a pseudonym or whatever, I don't want you all to get in trouble. Or if you are a vet and you're exploring DS, I'd love to hear about your experiences, right? And not any one of you. I don't care if you're from Germany, Iceland, South Korea, America, Canada, Oz, Mexico, doesn't matter. I'd like to hear about it, right? What challenges have you faced? Are you facing? Has your service influenced your dynamic at all? Do me a favor, reach out. Let me know. Hit me up on Fetlife. Get a hold of me on Instagram. Find me on Twitter, right? Email me. Throw me an email at thekinkperspective@gmail.com. I always enjoy hearing about different perspectives and seeing how they make this lifestyle work for different people. And if you all haven't learned one thing about me, if you do comment, if you do send me an email, I respond to each and every person. And if you ever go and look on my social media, I've sometimes had threads that have hundreds of comments, and I respond to each person. And I recently told a friend, I do so because if you've taken the time to say something or share a part of your story, I want you to know that at least I'm listening. Because that, for me, is really important. That's why I do it. Kind of getting off tangent here a little bit. Now, I have some other things that are in the works right now. I do want to let you all know. I'm going to kind of re-emphasize this point. I do have a book out there. It's a book I put out a couple of years ago. It's not the greatest book on BDSM, right? It's called Tangled Desires, the intersection between psychology and BDSM, or BDSM and psychology. God, I can't even remember. I'm getting old, so you have to bear with me. You can find it wherever you get your ebooks from, or there is a print version available. Now, the book does get a little bit repetitive and it is a little bit clinical, but the reality is that's to help reinforce some notions, and that's why I did it. So for the one person who didn't like it because I repeated a lot of things, well, think about it. If you're new, sometimes we have to get things drummed into us, right? Military service, we have to be told over and over, so we learn. Personally, I would have liked a book like mine because that would have helped me along the way understand things, so I don't walk into a dungeon and not know what to say, or say something to the wrong person, or maybe just how to act or where to look for information, all of these things, right? Also, I have something new I've started. I'm on Substack, sorry. Enhanced-Mind. You can find me there. I'll put a link up in the show description. You can start following my writings. There are some there's a paid plan, and then there's a free plan. I'm going to start putting up a mix of both, right? It's a great way for other people to support the work that I do, because I do put a lot of content out there. And if you just think, hey, Chris, you don't do enough, we just want all the free stuff you're giving us, well, don't worry. I have a further deal for you all. If you go to my website, on the resources tab, I have a link to my Google Drive, and there are actually free resources there that I've created for the community on vetting and self-check-ins and all these other nifty things. I think there's about 5 of them now, right? They're all free. I don't charge for them. You can go. Currently, everything there has been downloaded a couple thousand times at this point, which is great. I'm hearing from communities all over the world, Croatia, the Middle East, which is so awesome. I do have a conversation I will get to. I promised. He's been reaching out. We have a conversation going. We just got to figure out the timing. People in South America and Spain, my Spaniards. I love hearing from you all. My Canadians, my French Quebec. I love it. I appreciate all of you. I do listen and I do read your comments. And again, I do reach out. The Netherlands, I love you all, right? Every one of you. I love hearing from you guys. It brings us, if you can't hear it in my voice, I'm smiling right now. Because I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at all these comments right now, and it's really awesome for me. Because this has been a journey on 4 years I never thought I'd get to. But anyways, yes, my writing is there. I've gotten off tangent. Kind of a little bit of appreciation to you all, right? So let me know what you think about this. Military structure, strength, dominance, where you're at, submission. I'd like to keep this going. I appreciate you all listening today, taking the thoughts on your show, giving me this feedback. And again, if you do enjoy the podcast, don't forget to hit the follow button on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to rate the show, please. Right? It allows others to find it. It keeps, for now, I'm keeping the show. The show's been free for 4 years. I really want to keep it that way. And that's how I do that. As more people find the content, the more I can keep this doing for what, keeping it free for now. Anyway, until next time, everybody, be safe, stay king.